Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Tuesday, it's January 28th, and today is day 480 since the attacks by Hamas on October 7th of 2023. I'm going to go through a fair amount of updates of things happening in the United States, things happening in the broader Middle East. Use these as an encouragement of things to not only know about, but to pray about as well. The United States engagement via the Trump administration in the Middle East. Secretary of State Rubio met with King Abdullah II of Jordan. This was a phone call. There was a readout yesterday of the State Department. It didn't include anything terribly specific, but one can't help but wonder if part of this conversation addressed the content of what President Trump discussed with King Abdullah over the past several days, when Trump told Jordan his hopes that they would absorb 1.5 million Palestinians from Gaza. That's been in the news quite a bit, this call for the displacement of the Palestinian people of Gaza, Trump saying he wanted Jordan and Egypt, to take the population there. The call with Secretary of State Rubio, the readout said that it addressed the ceasefire in Gaza, the release of hostages, creating a pathway for security and stability in the region. Secretary Rubio also thanked Jordan for supporting the ceasefire and its integral role in providing humanitarian assistance through the Jordan corridor. As I mentioned yesterday, Jordan wholeheartedly rejected this request about the relocation of Palestinians out of Gaza, which was communicated quite clearly by the foreign minister of Jordan, Safadi, over the weekend. The Times of Israel reported today that Trump's ethnic cleansings related to Gaza remarks were coordinated with Netanyahu. The article was entitled Senior Cabinet Minister, referring to an Israeli minister, regarding Trump's Gaza migration idea and how it could save the Netanyahu government. The subtitle said that the U.S. president's bombshell proposal to clean out Gaza, that's a direct quote, and encourage Arab states to take its populace could keep Smotrich's party in the coalition and could perhaps prompt Ben-Gvir's return. According to the Times of Israel, Trump's conversation with Arab heads of state such as Jordan and later Egypt, when he was talking about taking Palestinians from Gaza, has raised hopes and expectations, not only in Israel's ideological right-wing circles, but also among certain members of Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition and senior Likud ministers. The Israeli senior cabinet member, who was not disclosed who it was, communicated that the move by Trump was likely coordinated with Israel and via Netanyahu, and was intended in part to help Netanyahu keep his government from collapsing over the current hostage ceasefire deal with Hamas. Now, I did just hear that Netanyahu was in a court or had something specific related to his indictments happen in the last day or so. That's not included in this update. I'll talk about that tomorrow. The article also asserts that within the Israeli government, encouraging voluntary Palestinian migration is back on the agenda. This is supported by far-right religious Zionists and some of the parties in the current coalition in Israel. The minister said if anyone agrees to migration, there will be no need to resume the war, and no one will have an issue with the second phase of the current deal. The far-right minister Smotrich, in response to the call for what's being called the Gaza migration plan, enthusiastically tweeted his praise for Trump, as did Ben-Gvir. Smotrich said, with God's help, I will work with the prime minister and cabinet to develop an operational plan to implement this as soon as possible. The idea of helping the people of Gaza find new places to live is a great idea, he wrote. After years of glorifying terror, they will be able to build new and better lives elsewhere. That's an end quote. Trump's special envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, is expected to be in Israel later this week. A congressional update. U.S. Congress has moved to sanction the International Criminal Court. This was supposed to be voted on today. I did not hear whether or not it's happened yet. European officials have warned that the bill, prompted by the arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, would irreparably harm the institution of the ICC. U.S. allies have said that the action would cripple the world's preeminent international court, that this would enable war criminals to act with impunity and would degrade the West's moral authority. The act before Congress is called the Illegitimate Court Counteraction Act. It was sponsored in the Senate by Tom Cotton of Arkansas and 11 other Republicans. It appeared like it was likely to pass today. It did pass in the Republican-led House earlier this month. GOP lawmakers drafted after the ICC issued warrants last spring for Netanyahu and then Defense Minister Gallant. This warrant for arrest also included 3 Hamas militants, 2 of whom have been confirmed dead, Ismail Haniyeh and Yahya Sinwar. Mohammed Diaf was the third, and Israel claims to have killed Mohammed Diaf last year, but his death has not been confirmed. Its GOP lawmakers drafted this requiring the imposition of sanctions against any individual that's involved in the ICC efforts to investigate, arrest, detain, or prosecute an American, an Israeli, or a U.S. ally. The bill, again, is supposed to be voted on today. The Israeli human rights group Yesh Din called my attention to something that's happening in Israel's Knesset. The latest today was that the Knesset tomorrow the Knesset will hold a preliminary vote on the proposed bill to eliminate discrimination in real estate purchases in Judea and Samaria. Judea and Samaria refers to the occupied West Bank. The bill is designed to make it easier and even to encourage Israeli settlers to purchase land in the West Bank. According to Yesh Din, the bill aims to address the alleged injustice of discrimination against settlers. But in reality, this is Yesh Din's quote, there's a deep and blatant discrimination in the West Bank's land regime, but it operates explicitly against Palestinians in favor of Israeli settlers. If this legislation is enacted, it will exacerbate an already existing discrimination. Moreover, and equally important, legislation by the Knesset concerning the occupied territory constitutes an assertion of the Knesset's sovereignty over that territory, which violates international law. International law prohibits annexation. Moving on to updates about the Israel-Hamas war, over 300,000 displaced Palestinians crossed into northern Gaza yesterday, and so Palestinians are on the move to return to what is left of their homes. 8 of the remaining 26 hostages due to be freed by Hamas have been identified as dead, according to an Israeli government spokesperson. He cited information received from Hamas. Israel claims that the group killed the hostages. Hamas has not commented on their cause of death. Formerly, Hamas had communicated that several hostages were killed because of Israeli airstrikes. An Israeli airstrike killed 2 Palestinian militants in the occupied West Bank city of Tulkarm yesterday. The Israeli military said it struck a militant who served as a Hamas local leader. And UNRWA, the UN aid agency for Palestinians, is preparing to vacate its East Jerusalem office following orders from Israel to cease its operation in the city yesterday. Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich has withdrawn a threat that he would quit the government over Gaza's ceasefire, according to Israeli news. Israel's conduct in Gaza has resulted in the deaths and injuries to pregnant women and girls, Human Rights Watch found in a report that they released today. I'd encourage you to take a look at that. The EU will restart a civilian mission monitoring the Rafah crossing. There's been much question about who will have control of the Philadelphia corridor. In phase 2, I believe it's supposed to return back to Egypt, but the EU will start to monitor it. Joining world leaders, the German Foreign Ministry said yesterday that Palestinians must not be expelled from Gaza in response to Trump's suggestion. Israeli troops yesterday, moving on to the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire, Israeli troops killed 2 Lebanese civilians attempting to enter the Israeli-occupied South Lebanon. 17 others were injured. This was following the extension of the ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel, which has now been extended to February 18th. Both Hezbollah and Israel have mandates to withdraw from South Lebanon, Hezbollah to the north, and Israel back to the state of Israel. In Syria, EU foreign ministers yesterday reached an agreement on a roadmap for easing the bloc's Syria's sanctions. This is according to EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas. And Churches for Middle East Peace Today issued, alongside of numerous international development agencies, a press release about the humanitarian snapshot. This one is number 9. We said, together we urgently call on the international community to address the escalating humanitarian crisis in Gaza. This comes as findings reveal the failure to implement critical provisional measures that were outlined by the International Court of Justice a year ago, resulting in unprecedented suffering among Palestinians. It's hard to believe that the ICJ's ruling about Israel's actions in Gaza, where they said that it could constitute a genocide, was a year ago. Since then, tens of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza have been killed, and the destruction carried out there is immeasurable and unfathomable. Today, I was on a webinar with Reverend Dr. Rob Dalrymple called Determine Truth with Daniel Benura and Jonathan Katab, 2 Palestinian Christians. We talked a lot about the current realities and specifically the unique call of the church. The webinar was called Beyond the Ceasefire, Peace and the Continuing Struggle in Israel-Palestine. I'd encourage you to watch that on YouTube. One of the things that I shared is the unique call of the church is that we must love better. We should be leading the way in what it means to show empathy, compassion, and love to each and every person who has experienced trauma these last 16 months, let alone 16 years. And the global church should be leading the way also in speaking truth. Dr. Maadi of Pasha in Jerusalem told me in November that unless truth is spoken, truth will be lost. And so these 2 things might seem like they're held in tension, to love better across divides, but also to speak truth about injustices and power imbalances and the atrocities that have been committed in the last 15, 16 months. May we speak honestly and clearly about the injustices and abuses we've witnessed, calling the world and ourselves to do better, to advocate for peace and long-lasting solutions that would avoid further violence, bloodshed, and war. May God go before us in these efforts. In the name of Christ, amen.